Well, hello there. This is Louis, aka Louis the Frenchie Manette, and you're listening to the Frenchie Watches. On today's episode, you are listening the Frenchie Watches The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. So that being said, I have my man back with us 2 weeks in a row, Mr. Soda. How are you today?
I'm doing good, Louis. Yourself?
I'm good. I can't wait to go in the meaty subjects for this classic movie that I've seen a couple of times, but with research gave me a whole new perspective on what we can talk about and how I see the movie now.
Oh, for sure. This is my favorite horror movie of all time.
Yeah, and just by pure randomness that we actually chose this movie. This was not pure planned. I did not know this was one of your favorite movies, but I'm happy it is because it's going to be an interesting talk.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, this is a movie I actually came to later in life. One of my best friends introduced it to me, and I'm really glad he did. It is easily one of the greatest movies of all time.
I remember watching this movie for the first time. My dad wanted to rent a movie, and he doesn't know movies that well. It was actually the new releases because it was like this special edition. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
he thought it was a new movie. I really wanted to see it. I didn't know what it was, and then realized it was an old movie that you've already seen before, and he was pissed off. But I was amazed with that movie, and it's something he would have probably not let me watch otherwise, but by accident. And it kind of changed. It was one of my first horror movies that I remember too.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, I think I came to it probably in my early 20s.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh,
it was just a movie that my parents didn't really introduce me to a lot of horror movies.
hmm.
So most of the horror movies I've seen were introduced to me by friends. Like I said, one of my best friends showed it to me because this is one of his favorite movies also.
All right. So that being said, for the movie itself, it's obviously directed by John Carpenter, who also produced or directed, I should say, Halloween and such classics as Big Trouble in Little China. Fun fact: writer is Bill Lancaster, which didn't do a lot of stuff, but the movie he did prior before that was Bad News Bears.
Yep. And his father is acclaimed actor Burt Lancaster.
Huh. Oh,
Yep.
we already started the trivia. All right.
Yes,
So
sir.
talking about trivia, let's you know what? I want to push that back 2 seconds. My bad. I just want to go over your favorite part of the movie, either scene or element. What stuck out to you? Even you probably seen it a billion times. What stood out to you this time?
Well, nothing really stood out, but it still remains my favorite scene in the whole movie. It is when they are doing the autopsy on Norris,
Mm,
and the doc goes to defibrillate him, and the chest opens up and takes his arms.
yeah.
And then you get the giant monster come out of Norris, and then when they burn him alive, the head comes off and crawls away. Easily my
Mm.
favorite scene in the whole movie.
All right. Yeah, it's when I was the first time I saw it, I was really like shocked. It's not something you expect. It has this effect of like the same thing that Alien did. It's something unknown, unseen that you couldn't have really imagined before that is presented in front of your face, and it makes for some shocking and brain burning moment of movie. You know.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. On my end, it's two elements. The first element is the music. John Carpenter is an amazing director, but his sensibility when it comes to music is above and beyond a lot of other people, a lot of composers, especially in those times that most movies were, orchestrated with actual instrumentation. He goes in a route of in that time digital music, but it's not cheesy. It could have been so cheesy, especially with the limited capacity of the 80s, but he really found a way to stay ominous and at the same time being so hypnotizing and really creating this sense of dread and awe in the movie.
Yeah, you're right. John Carpenter is a great composer, and he's really good at that. However, he did not compose the score to this movie. It was
Oh,
Ennio Morricone who won the Academy Award for The Hateful Eight 5 years ago, and
okay.
is probably best known for doing the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly theme song, which is the.
Hmm.
So it was actually Ennio Morricone who did the score for this.
All right. At the same time, I know he had a lot of influence because I know he
Oh, for
composed.
sure.
He composed. So my bad on that trivia, but I know he composed a lot of other movies. And I recently listened to both of his albums, actually, and he's an amazing composer. But you can see he had a hand in it. His influence is all over the soundtrack.
Yeah, for sure. If he didn't make it as a director, he definitely would have been a great musician.
Yeah. Well, he is a musician
But
technically.
I mean, like, if he
Yeah.
didn't go into the filmmaking, he could have definitely made a career out of music.
All right. And my favorite scene is very subtle, but it's something that stood out to me this time is when they bring back for the first time they discover the burnt alien body.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they bring back there's just couple seconds, but this moment that you can see Mac is looking around at everyone, that he's being so suspicious. He knows something is up, right? For me, that was like the trigger moment of the beginning of the paranoia, but it was done so subtly and so well done that for me it stood out because it was really great acting without saying anything, without doing anything grand,
Mm-hmm.
just with the movement of the eyes, you know.
Yeah, it must be so subtle that I've missed it. I've never actually noticed that.
You can really see, like, the second they bring in the body, you can see he stares at everyone, and you can see something is running in his head. Something there's the mechanisms of doubt and untrust is really building because already he's a very unsociable person. You can see with the way he treats his chest wizard computer,
Yeah.
and his best friend is a bottle of hard alcohol, which, by the way, through the whole movie is freaking empty. You can clearly see it.
Yeah.
So, he's a very unsociable person, and you see that paranoia that is already set in because they're so isolated.
Mm-hmm.
Really kicks it even a notch, and started with Mac.
You did that, so that would be when they brought in that mutilated body from the Norwegian camp, right?
Exactly. The
Okay.
first time they saw it and they unveil it, and then Mac realizes something. Like, he's the only one that kind of like is bright enough to see, like, this is not natural and what is going on, because the other ones just are freaked out, but they don't really question anything.
Okay. Yeah, no, like I said, I've watched this movie quite a few times and I never noticed that. So
Oh,
good on you for picking that up.
thank you, sir. All right, so on to the trivia, my friend.
Okay, so this movie is based on an adaptation of a pulp story called Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, and is actually a remake of a 1951 Howard Hawks movie called The Thing from Another World.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it was filmed in 1982. Actually, it would have been filmed in 81, then released in 82. Outdoor photography was done in two places: Juneau, Alaska, and what is actually a big deal where I am from. It's also was partially filmed in a small town outside of a small town called Stewart, British Columbia, which is about 4 hours away from my hometown. And you can actually go there and you can find where they filmed, where the outpost was filmed.
So I'm guessing it's a big event because nothing much happens in your area. So when something like that happens, it's big.
Yeah, for sure. You can go there, and a lot of the regulars were around in the when this movie was filmed, so they have plenty of stories. The famous bar up there where you can get Heiderized. Kurt Russell and John Carpenter went to that bar quite a bit, it turns out. And also, the Stewart was also where the film, what is it, Insomnia with Robin Williams and Al Pacino was also filmed there. Yeah, same place.
Well, they picked a great location because I this time I actually noted things to get more prepared. And apparently I still do mistakes because I thought Carpenter did the music. But you can really see how vast it is. It really looks like the Arctic. So the location was really well selected. It's beautiful to see the mountain range are really like reflect of what I would imagine the Arctic. And if I would have known, I was guessing probably Alaska, but I would have never thought they actually shot in Vancouver.
Well, You're
Oh, BC, BC.
Yeah, you're actually partially right. Stewart is on the border of British Columbia and Alaska. So
Mm.
you are partially right. And yes, I've been up there a couple times, not to the filming location, but I've been to Stewart, and it is very beautiful up there. There's glaciers all over the place. It is a very, very beautiful, beautiful area.
Nice place to visit, not to live, I'm sure.
Pretty much. It's right now it's pretty much a ghost town. You got probably about 500 people living there. It is a very, very small town. Like you have to go out of town a few hours to actually go to like a big store.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, not nice, but it must be an interesting way to live.
Yeah.
That's good. On to more trivia, sir.
Okay, so the special effects person who did this, Rob Bottin, was 22 years old when he did the effects for this, when him and his team did the effects. And they were considered some of the most advanced special effects at the time. Like definitely some of the most ambitious.
Oh yeah, yeah. I find it still stands out to this day, and honestly, I watched it in high definition. This movie,
Same.
This is a movie to watch in either 4K or high def because even though it's an older movie, it is beautiful to look at, and the visual effects really stand out. Even though you can see certain things that yeah, you can see it's not today's technology, but there's something about that really stands out and makes it even more gruesome, I find.
Yeah, 100%. I did watch it in 4K because I have the Shout Factory Blu-ray copy of it, and
Nice.
yeah, no. Whenever I talk to people about why I think visual effects are better, this is definitely one of the movies I bring up just because they are so detailed and so good, and they hold up almost 30 years, 40 years later at this point. And they did a prequel in, I believe it was 2011 called The Thing, which actually the movie takes place in the Norwegian camp that these guys go and visit. Yeah. And I personally like the movie, but one of the major downfalls one of the major things I dislike about it is the use of the CGI there. It is horrible CGI, and it definitely takes away from the mystique of The Thing. What's shitty about that is they actually did have models built, but then they decided during post-production to turn it to CGI, but that's besides the point. And here's a fun fact for you. This movie came out in June of 1982 on the same day as Blade Runner.
Huh.
And it was released 2 weeks after E.T. the Extraterrestrial. So all three of those movies were at the theater at the exact same time.
Well, that's a prime time for cinema right there. Three classics. I myself was considering eventually to do a Blade Runner, the Frenchie watches, but that's interesting. I did not know it was same period.
Yeah, it's the exact same time. Up against E.T., which for a time was actually the highest grossing movie of all time. And what's funny is, like Blade Runner, The Thing was a commercial and critical failure when it came out. It did not do well at all. It was only after it came to home video that it developed the love that it has now, and critics have been going back and been changing their opinions, and that's why it's now considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time. Which is, like I said, it's unfortunate that when it came out, it didn't do well.
Well, there's a lot of movies like that. Like Citizen Kane, really was not well received, if not mistaken, and now it's considered one of the greatest classics.
Yeah, considered the greatest movie of all time.
Exactly. So a lot of the great classics that we consider today don't always do well on the box office because it's so different, right? Especially The Thing. There's not, I don't recall, except for maybe Alien, having that kind of like horror, that kind of like shock factor, And I'm referring to the chest burster scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there wasn't a lot of movies like that, so it must have been a bit jarring for the audience when they realized like what kind of movie it was going to be.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like if you think about it in terms of American horror movies at the time, there were very few that went into the excessive gore. You mostly got that with like the European movies, like the Hammer movies and stuff like that. So on this side of the Atlantic Ocean, yeah, at that time wasn't prevalent, so to speak. So it definitely must have been jarring for those in theaters. I wouldn't doubt that.
All right. Anything else?
Right off the top of my head, no, that is all that I can think of.
All right. Now in that case, like I forgot like a bit of the opening scene. If we go back to the movie a bit, I can imagine for those first time seeing the movie, they really must have like asked themselves, "What is going on? Why is that guy in a helicopter chasing a wolf? You know,
Yeah.
or a dog, I should say." But it's a full circle, right? Especially now, like we know, like the sequel with the Norwegian camp, what's going on, but. It's an interesting concept to open that movie that way because it creates doubts, it creates confusion, but it's the perfect setup to start the movie, start the paranoia. Like it's an innocent creature, right? A wolf. Why would you want to chase that? And it made no sense, but at the same time, it's just
Yeah,
brilliant.
no, 100%. It is definitely that's what I like about this movie. It is the goriest whodunit movie I've ever seen.
Yeah, it is as much as a suspense than a gore movie, which is hard to come by because having that balance, usually it's one or the other,
Mhm.
right? But having that balance is fragile because one would usually overshadow because they're usually so different. It's two spectrums, right? Usually suspense is what you don't see, is what you have to guess. And this kind of gore is in your face. So finding that balance must have been a challenge for Carpenter.
Yeah, no kidding. But that's the beauty thing about Carpenter. He's a very good storyteller. He definitely knows how to, especially when it comes to his horror movies. He definitely knows how to play on the senses of the audience. That's why Halloween still works many years as it's been since it's been released.
Mm. And another thing I want to talk about is um, like the alien itself, right? I find it interesting because I start questioning its reasoning, its the purpose of existence, right? Basically, what we understood from the alien from the movie is it's a single cell organism, so every part is a living part,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what is its purpose? Is it more like just to reproduce and to exist, or it's made to kill? You know, what is this logic in your case, in your point
Well,
of
see,
view?
I've always not expected. I've always viewed it as survival,
Mm,
especially in this case. Like now, I can't speak to what would happen if it were to go out in the world, but in terms of this, it is definitely a creature of survival. Like they even hinted at it in the movie. That's why the part. That's why the McCready said the head ripped off of Norris, and the blood jumped and all that stuff, because it is trying to survive, self preserve itself.
yeah, but yeah, at the same time, I still question because it's still trying to self-preserve, but you know, it landed on Earth, right? So we never really get the explanation of why was it on Earth. Was it sent to Earth? Was it just a deviation? So I'm just trying to speculate. Like if we can again compare to the xenomorph in Alien, yes, it in a sense is kind of trying to survive because it's put in onto a ship and it has people trying to kill it, but its main purpose is to kill,
Mhm.
right? It just has this basic animal instinct to kill. I do agree it's trying to survive, but the fact that it doesn't try to flee away or like go to get another way of transportation and just get out and or try to re-go to its spaceship. The only thing it does is stay there, reprocreate, and kill. Makes me think that yes, it's trying to survive, but its main basic instinct is to kill.
Well, that's probably the best thing about this movie. It is definitely a movie that leaves you thinking, because you never really
Mm,
know until it's revealed who is infected. And like our just brief discussion here, you know what are the motives of the character, and then there's also the scene at the end where either Child
mm,
or McCready infected. Like that is
mm.
probably the biggest debate to come out of the movie, is were either of them infected, or were they both okay?
And at the same time, and that I never understood. Maybe you can clarify that because you've probably seen it a lot more times than I did. Is do the infected realize they're infected?
I don't think so, to be honest. I really don't. So I'm just going to read a brief excerpt from Wikipedia on the McCready Childs thing. Several people suggest that Child was infected, citing the cinematographer's statement that he deliberately provided a subtle illumination to the eyes of uninfected characters, something absent from Child's. Similarly, others have noted a lack of visible breath from the creature in the frigid air. While both aspects are present in McCready, their absence in Childs have been explained as a technical issue with the filming. So a lot of people they sit there and they study and they're trying to find the littlest hints as to who if they're both okay or whatever. And the fact that it ends without giving us an answer is good. It's a good idea on their part.
Oh yeah, it creates a lore, right? It creates something, like you said, it really makes you think. It makes your imagination go wild, and this is where like the prequel, we can say, is kind of disappointing, because I would have enjoyed it more as a sequel to really dive deeper into understanding what happened and going through a different route, instead of basically doing a copy paste and just explain what happened to the region, because that's where a movie becomes less effective. If you know all the characters are going to die, or if you know what exactly happened before and you're just trying to fill in the void, it kind of lessens the movie, right?
Yeah, well, in the prequel, the main character played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, it's actually left ambiguous as to whether she survived or not. So you're not really sure when it comes to her. But yeah, no, like I said, it's a great way to end the movie. There was a video game that came out in the early 2000s on the thing. It actually took place after the movie. I don't think it's canon, but it actually reveals at the end that McCready survived, and he's the one that comes and rescues you from the outpost. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. I did not know. I never played.
Me neither. It's one I just heard about it recently, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
All right. Okay, and let's go to the second part. Before we go to the second part, we have a little announcement of one of our shows. So give it a couple of seconds and enjoy.
Well, hello there. This is Louis the Frenchie Manette. Now listen to me closely, okay? Do you need to update your podcast logo design? Outdated? Or always wanted to look more professional with your own business card? Now, from graphic design to audio-visual equipment rental, Axaware is your main spot. This is professional service and competitive prices. You can always reach them at 956-312-4823 on Facebook under Axaware, or simply axaware@gmail.com. That is ACSIWARE, Axaware. We got you covered.
Hey everybody, this is your friendly neighborhood soda, Matt Majot here, and I'm here to talk to you about Ringside Rewind, the podcast that I do where we go over old matches, and I'm usually joined by a guest who fell out of wrestling a long time ago or has never seen a wrestling match, and we go over it. I go through behind the scene details, and they give their opinions on the match and what they liked about it and what we didn't like about it. And yeah, it's a great deep dive into the classic matches of old. So once again, that is Ringside Rewind, and hopefully you listen and enjoy.
Well, welcome back. Now this is part 2 of the Frenchie Watches The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. All right, so the other aspect I wanted to touch about is really the symbology, the message behind. There's a lot of research done. This is something also I kind of picked up this time before even researching it. Yes, the obvious thing is paranoia, but we'll talk about the paranoia aspect a bit later. The true symbology is, well, something that was really, apparent, big, and that caused paranoia as well in the 80s is the viral nature of the creature itself, lends to the metaphor of AIDS.
Really? You got that from this? Because the AIDS pandemic was way after this.
Yeah, but John Carpenter actually stated the fact that even though it's not his main purpose, basically it lends to that, and that's why it's not his main message, but at the same time, it's a message that you can relate, right?
Okay,
because there's a lot of things that was not done on purpose, but at the same time, really conveys the paranoia that they were going through in at that time, right? So one of the things, if I could just pull out my notes here, well, one thing is the paranoia of not knowing, you know, who might be infected. The paranoia of like the people you trusted or you knew the most could actually be the reason why the beginning of the end happens, right? Same thing for McCready and all the people. It kind of shows like they've been working together for a long time. They know each other, you know, the ins and outs of that camp. You know, they've been stuck together for not for the first day, right? So they're familiar with each other, they're used to each other, but then this thing happens. Same thing for the AIDS. It created this paranoia because the closest people, the people you loved, could be used unwittingly as a weapon, right? As something dangerous, and that created a lot of paranoia in the 80s. Another thing that with a lot of research, they have really interesting parallels with it is the fact that now we know. Back then, they didn't know, but now we know that it's pretty much confirmed that for AIDS, it's cellular contact through fluid. And one thing that was apparent is the beginning, the first time you see the dog do a metamorphosis, it shoots out fluid, right? It shoots out its cellular matter to infect, to create new organisms. And the first thing it does even before it transforms, when it's on a dog's form, it actually like tries to lick the one of the humans, right? Tries to infect it with its saliva. So even though it wasn't a clear message, it kind of resonated with the times, and John Carpenter actually talks about it in a couple of his interviews, how relatable and how parallel the movie and the paranoia of AIDS in the 80s really fit together.
Wow, yeah, that's never something I've ever heard. See, what I got from that is you got to remember when the movie was made. It was during the height of the Cold War. Right. So yeah, that's why I've never saw the AIDS thing coming, but no, it makes perfect sense. But with the Cold War thing, it's like you can know your neighbor all your life, and then the next thing you know, they're a Russian spy or whatever. So that definitely plays into the paranoia of it, and trying to separate yourself from all that and to isolate yourself and whatnot. So yeah, no, I took it as more of a metaphor in the Cold War.
Yeah, and both Cold War and AIDS, the underlying is paranoia, right? Because it's the unseen enemy, which in one case, AIDS is viral, right? So you don't see it, and same thing that goes with my question beforehand, right? Do the infected know they're infected? Do they know they're creatures, or they know they've been altered in some way? Kind of resonates at the same time of AIDS, because unless you're tested or things become awry, like one of the scenes, one of the guys die and he transforms, he could be aware before, so there is this subconscious thing that, with AIDS, you don't know you're affected and you're affecting other people until it's maybe too late, or until you have to get tested. Hence the blood scene, when they test with the heat and you can see a positive effect, and then the other one becomes the creature. So there's a lot of parallels of not knowing what you are or what you have become until it is too late.
Not like hearing you explain it and stuff. Yeah, it definitely makes sense. It's just weird that this one ended up being a potential metaphor for it, because the AIDS pandemic was later. But no, it definitely makes perfect sense. And like another thing that adds to my view of the Cold War comparison is when Blair is sitting at the computer and he's running the numbers on like how fast people around the world will be infected or whatever. That's an allegory for nuclear annihilation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, actually, I didn't see. It's funny, because probably because I studied sexology. That's why my brain went to when I rewatch it. But yeah, it does make sense for Cold War, because that's also a very hidden thing. You can't read someone's mind, right? Thought is a very secret, and you can only see it once the true person actually reveals themselves, who they really are, right? And gets out of the mask of what they're portraying, what they're trying to act out. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and then like another thing that I came across was there's also people that believe this movie is an example of H.P. Lovecraft's cosmic horror. The idea that there are ancient inhuman beings that exist that don't care about humanity at all.
Yeah, and you see that kind of like goes into what I said before. Like, what's the basic instinct of this creature? Was it just lost, or was it on Earth purposely to spread as a contagion?
Yeah,
because if it wants to spread as a contagion, if it's like a bit more of a Lovecraft inspired creature, it's not just trying to survive. It's trying to survive because it's trying to get killed, but its main purpose is to dominate,
Yeah.
and not necessarily a lone, survivor that got deviated from its course.
Yeah, and to add on to the comparisons between Lovecraft and this movie, you have like the creature itself in Lovecraftian literature, the monster or what have you is never described. It's never really given a proper shape, which is what the thing is in this movie. It can be seen, but you don't quite know what it is. And also, you got the character of Blair, who becomes incredibly paranoid about everybody in the camp and starts trying to destroy things. And he's pretty much driven insane by what's going on. And then at the end of the movie, he becomes the thing, which is another aspect from Lovecraftian literature.
Interesting, and because a lot of parallels can be done, right? But this is my mind going. It kind of reflects as well for me when it comes to the AIDS metaphor. Relating to that is there's so much, fear and paranoia that a lot of people became, aggressive, paranoid, and violent towards, the suspected people, which were the LGBT community, and also the African American community. So there's a lot of like stigmatism that was built just out of assuming and seeing the things around them and putting things together and just trying to defend themselves, but in a very wrong way.
Yeah, for sure. And it also draws in parallels to McCarthyism, which was before the Cold War, but it's essentially what you just said. You're wary and you're accusing of everybody around you of being something they're not. And like holding it against them, like McCarthyism. Like think of how many names that Senator Joseph McCarthy discredited because he accused him of being a communist and stuff like that. It's no different than what happened in the 80s with the AIDS pandemic.
Yeah, it just goes to show you also just how the human brain works, right? If we put both symbologies together, it just bunch of people assuming, afraid, and coming to their own conclusions and having its own instinct of survival, even though that their reasoning might be completely flawed for them, that this is the exact truth and I'm going to defend myself from it.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things that pretty much all humans have is distrust for everybody around us and the fear of betrayal by those closest to us, and also our bodies in some sense. So that's another thing in there too.
Yeah, and that's an actual good point. Like the distrust of your own body goes with it goes with any disease. If you think about it, it's as relevant today's age with COVID-19 that to AIDS, it's just viral, something you can't see, but it's transforming or mutating inside your body, and you're not aware until it's too late, until you feel the symptoms. And like I forgot the character's name, but when they're in the outpost and you see he takes off his backpack, he's hurting, right? His shoulder hurts, so he has the symptoms, but he doesn't quite like take notice or be concerned, and then a couple minutes after he dies and the creature pops up. So no, it's very
Yeah,
interesting.
no, for sure. And it is also something that you could parallel with the, like you just brought up, the COVID-19 outbreak that's going on right now. Because if you're looking throughout society, you've got people that are shutting themselves in their homes because they don't want to come anywhere near people. You've got people that are walking around with masks and like hazmat
Mhm.
suits and whatever, and they get mad at people who get too close to them. And yeah, it once again, it's that whole distrust thing, right?
Yeah, and again, I'm not good with character names, but the one he actually shut off, and he's like, no, I swear, I'm not gonna
Blair,
hurt
his
anyone.
name Blair.
Yeah, I'm gonna be okay, and like they just close the door on him. It kind of feels like today's age, right? Like everyone's forced to be in this situation, except for the essential people, but they're still forced to be confined. No matter what the reasoning is, this is what you have to do to protect the other people,
Yeah.
right? So it's movie. It just shows, like with the Jaws discussion last week and today's discussion, how movies are applicable to a lot of things, but how essentially it shows the human psyche, how effed up we are, how the darker side of humanity, especially we tend to choose deeper movies, but how as humans we are complicated
Yeah,
creatures.
no, for sure. And that's one of the things that makes a movie great and memorable is how relatable it is no matter what era you're from. Because this movie came out in the 80s, but it reflects on something that happened in the 60s with the Cold War, the 80s with the AIDS pandemic, and modern day with the COVID-19. So it's definitely a very relatable movie. It's an interesting way to go about it with an alien creature, but it's very relatable.
Yeah, it's very relatable, and it's because the great movies, the ones that last through time, are the ones that are able to embottle and take the essence of one idea, which in this case would be
Mm-hmm.
paranoia, would be distrust, and the human nature of instinct and survival is paramount. Because if you're not able to get that essence and make it through your subconscious, but essentially it's an alien horror movie, but deeper meaning, it's about the paranoia. It's hard to get that
No, for
essence.
sure. It definitely is transcendent. It transcends the genre and transcends movies.
Yeah. Also, then, uh, like again, that's another thing I realized. Like the only, like best friends that Mac had was he killed it at the beginning, but was like a wizard computer and his bottle. So like the most the things that couldn't kill him were like things that were not human or alive.
Yeah, and that's funny. It shows the level of mistrust at the beginning when he destroys the computer and he calls it a cheating bitch. I think it was. But yeah, it just shows you how much he doesn't like society. Apparently,
I'm sure like there's a reason why he's in Antarctica. He doesn't look like a scientist per se. So to be doing what he does, you kind of have to either be really passionate about your science or just not like humans and be okay being surrounded by like just 10 to
yeah.
15 people, and that's it. So, and that's another thing I want to touch about is, in certain movies, they are usually better actors than others, especially got Kurt Russell, which is such a classic, legendary actor we know in
Yeah.
today's age. But the acting is really incredible all across the
No, hands
board.
down, it was a perfectly cast movie.
Hmm. Yeah, it's no one like overshadowed each other. They all had their own part. They all really played paranoia, fear, distrust perfectly. And it must have been weird too being on set. Now we were so familiar with the creature designs, etc. But it must have been an interesting feeling and experience seeing the actual models of like the creatures, because it's such a inhuman and something we haven't seen before. So it must have been an interesting experience for the actors to play with
Yeah,
it,
no
you know?
kidding. And that's something that you essentially lose in today's movies when you're using CGI is you're using that physical thing to play off of, and that's another reason why this makes this so great is the effects. Like they look real. So I mean, that for sure, it must have been like the thing was actually in the room when they were doing those scenes, and I wouldn't be surprised if none of
Yeah.
them saw the effects before they made it to set.
Yeah, and now could you, if we're going more again into the movie, could you go back to the first time you ever saw the movie? Um, where where do you thought that this was going to go? Like, did you think that there would be only two people surviving, or like, what was your thought process, if you
Well,
can
the thing,
remember?
it's funny. This is one of those movies that I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about going in. So I definitely didn't see the ending the way it happening. Where, like you said, it was two people surviving. I thought they would have for sure killed it, and then like most movies, been rescued or whatever. But to leave it on that air of uncertainty. Are they going to make it? Are they going to die? One of them infected? Whatever. Yeah, definitely didn't see that coming. And I've always been a fan of visual of practical effects. And the very first time I
Mm.
saw it, it just blew my mind.
No, it's yeah, like I said, it's so well done, but it's also it's so weird, and it's body horror,
Oh,
like it
for
or
sure.
not. But it's such an unusual choice because there could have been a lot of ways, a lot of like directions they could have went, because there's some alien movies back in the day, but no one really thought of going down that route. This was just such a unique experience, a unique design that I wonder how they
Yeah,
got to
that's one of
that.
those things. Like with movies like this, and especially with ones where you've never seen effects like this, it could easily have gone the other way and sunk the movie. Like just would have looked so horribly.
And by the way, just a little, I was actually trying to extend our conversation 2 seconds because I'm doing research on AIDS. Actually, the pandemic started pre
Oh,
1980s. Yeah, while sporadic cases of AIDS were documented in the 1970s, available data suggests that the current pandemic started in the mid to late 70s. By 1980, HIV may have already spread to 5 continents, and in this period, between 100,000 and 300,000 could have already been infected. And then the real craze started in
oh,
1981. A rare lung infection called pneumocystis carinii pneumonia were found in 5 young, previously healthy gay men in Los Angeles. So yeah, it might have also, because I know he said it wasn't his purpose, but subconsciously, a lot of movies borrow from their surroundings, right? And the mood that is lingering in the society on that day and age. So it must have really imprinted into the movie, like it or not, if it was
yeah,
willingly or
no,
not.
fair enough. I didn't realize that's how early the AIDS pandemic had struck, but no, not now hearing that, yeah, it probably was subconscious more than anything else.
Yeah, it's again, the movies really do a good job on reflecting society. Like I said, like it or not, it is a mirror, and that makes me wonder what kind of movies we're gonna get in 2021, 2022. The ones that weren't planned before the COVID, but the result of reflection on today's like day and age and today's society. Because we might get some really interesting horror
Yeah,
movies, man.
no kidding.
All right. Okay, so I think that pretty much concludes our
Just one
episode.
more thing I want to say. I'm
Oh yeah.
just going back to the critical response of this movie. When this movie came out, here are some of the quotes about this movie. Some reviewers were dismissive of the film, calling it the quintessential moron movie of the 1980s, instant junk, and a wretched excess. Starlog's Alan Spencer called it a cold and sterile horror movie, attempting to cash in on the genre audience against the optimism of E.T., the reassuring return of Star Trek II, the technical perfection of Tron, and the sheer integrity of Blade Runner.
Yeah, again, because it's
Oh,
so
for sure.
different, right? It's so drastically. in your face. And again, we talked about it. The designs are so inhuman and
Yeah.
alien, that, yes, ET is alien, but has two legs, two arms, a mouth, two eyes, and is able to communicate. This has like spider legs and twisting arms and, membranes and shooting, squirting. It's so weird that unless you are a fan of that kind of like genre of in your face stuff, it is hard to swallow, and it definitely wouldn't be considered
No, for
high
sure.
art,
ET, you know what it is. The Thing, you don't. So yeah.
And that's why it draws a great parallel to virus, to things that we can't see. Is it's hard to imagine like a COVID-19 cell. It has no arms. It isn't, or just
Yeah.
disease in general. Usually you can't see it, but it's such a different type of life form that reacts and lives so differently the way we can conceive life, that it makes it horrifying. And same thing for this. It's so not living to how we consider what living is, that it really makes it hard to swallow for certain people. All right. So I think anything else?
Yeah, one thing. There is a board. This is not a plug or anything, but there is a board game out there based on this movie. It's called The Thing: Infection at Outpost 31. It's one of the best board games I've ever played. You actually play as the characters of the movie, and the point is to escape on the helicopter and make sure the Thing doesn't make it on. It is a game I've played 5 times. I've never won. The Thing has won every time. It's that hard. So I recommend recommend if you have the opportunity to play it.
Interesting. It's like, do players play as an infected? Like, do they know they're infected and just don't tell anyone?
So you got the first area, one person's infected, and they are the only ones who know. Second area, another person gets infected, and it's done via the blood test they do in the movie. Third area, you add another infected, and then after that, you got to try to escape on the helicopter, and you vote 3. I think somebody else becomes infected, and then you vote what 3 members of the group go onto the helicopter, and if the Thing is left behind, the humans win. If the Thing makes it out, you lose. Yeah.
Huh. That's a bravo to the person who came up with that.
It's a great game. Very hard. Very hard.
All right.
No, that is
anything else? All right, so let's wrap it up. Where can we find you on the internet, my good sir?
All over the platforms. That's soda_the_saxman. I don't have a lot going on nowadays, so I'm very easily reachable, and you might find me sometimes lurking on the Schmoes of the North Facebook group.
Yes, sir. And same thing for me. You can find me on Twitter as well, on the Northern Schmoes. And also, if anyone's listening and made it to the end, and you definitely want us to cover a movie in some sorts, well, if you're listening on the Anchor app, you can definitely send us a message on what you would love to hear from us. We will go deep dive into the trivia, into the deeper meaning of it. It'll be our pleasure to present it to you. And if you're not already subscribed, if you're listening on Spotify, please subscribe to not miss anything from our amazing shows. That being said, thank you very much for listening. Until next time.